Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin in Saskatchewan, where the chief of the Kettle, Nakota Nation says police are still searching for what he says are suspects. This follows the deaths of 2 women and 2 men found in a home on the north side of the First Nation on Tuesday morning. Chief Aishape also says the File Hills Police Service is currently patrolling the nation to make sure everyone is safe. Saskatchewan RCMP say they are still not able to name the 4 victims as they're working with the Saskatchewan Coroner's Service and the families to formally identify the bodies. Kristen Achkate has more.
When the File Hills Police Service arrived at the residence, they located 4 individuals deceased inside and immediately determined the circumstances to be suspicious. As a result, the Saskatchewan RCMP Major Crimes Branch was contacted to assist and has since taken carriage of the investigation. At this point, we do believe that the residence was targeted.
Saskatchewan RCMP are still determining whether the Kettle and Zakameh incidents are related, and if 29-year-old Keegan Panapakisik is involved in the 4 deaths. Panapakisik was arrested by Regina police in the city early Wednesday morning and was the lone suspect named by RCMP. He is alleged to have been part of a firearm incident in Zakameh on Tuesday afternoon, about 4 hours after police found the 4 deceased in CTK. Panapakisik has been charged with 1 count of pointing a firearm and 1 count of possession of a firearm. Regina police also arrested 2 other people Wednesday morning but did not release their names. On Tuesday, Cowessess and Ochapowace First Nation west of Zakameh named 2 suspects, Panapakisik and a female suspect, as peoples of interest following the firearm incident, but RCMP has not named that female suspect. Meanwhile, Kettle has lit a 4-day healing fire, and its hall and youth center are open to offer mental health assistance and support. In a statement, Chief Aishape said police have received many leads in the investigation. He added, "I want to send a special thanks to all those that have come to sit with us last night, prayed for us, and the calls and messages. To my other family nations, we appreciate all the reach-outs, support, and most importantly, the love we have felt in the last 24 hours." RCMP Major Crimes remains on scene in CTK and continues their investigation this week.
To Manitoba now, where RCMP Major Crimes say they are investigating a sudden death on the Penamotang First Nation, 240 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. On Friday, January 31st, the family was told that 50-year-old April Woodhouse was found lying outside on the steps of a home in Penamotang. She was taken to hospital in nearby Ashern, but later died. The family says hospital staff told them Woodhouse had signs of internal bleeding and that her hands and other parts of her body were bruised. Initially, the RCMP said Woodhouse's death was not a homicide. However, today, RCMP told APTN News Major Crimes is investigating, adding the autopsy has been scheduled for early next week, which should provide information on any criminality or if it was due to exposure. Officers in the community are currently taking statements from people who may have been in contact with her prior to her death. 2 people were sentenced today for their roles in the death of Megan Gallagher. Gallagher went missing from Saskatoon in 2020, and her remains were found 2 years later along the South Saskatchewan River near St. Louis. 9 people were accused of various charges in her death. This morning at the Court of King's Bench in Saskatoon, family and friends of Megan Gallagher gathered for the sentencing of Summer Sky Henry and Cheyenne Petitus. Both pleaded guilty to manslaughter last month. Today, they each received 7 years in federal prison with credit for time served. Petitus will serve nearly 6 years after receiving credit for 378 days, while Henry will serve just under 5.5 years after receiving credit for 609 days. A publication ban is currently in place to protect the upcoming trials of the final two accused in Gallagher's death. Thomas Sutherland is charged with manslaughter. Roderick Sutherland is charged with first-degree murder. They go on trial later this year. A homeless shelter that serves clientele in Montreal, many of whom are Indigenous and residential school survivors, is about to run out of funding. Executive Director David Chapman says he met with Quebec's Minister of Social Services, Lionel Carmont, in November last year. The discussion revolved around the desire for the centre to expand its services and that there's a deficit in funding. The centre says the funding deficit is not being addressed, and as a result, the centre is weeks away from running out of money to continue its operations. Chapman says the minister has not responded to the letter Resilience sent to him on Monday. It asked for a response to this issue and to urgently provide funding so that Resilience can continue its services. The minister responded to APTN's request for comment, promising that the regional healthcare centre closest to Resilience Montreal will reach out.
In 3 weeks, basically, we run out of money. So we go below zero. And when you go below zero, then you have to make hard choices, Obviously, if we do actually go below zero, then we're going to be looking at closing for a time. And that's obviously not something we want to do. But it also asks the bigger question, why year after year do we have to keep doing this scramble?
Our Truth in Politics panel is coming up. We're going to be discussing Jordan's principle. That's coming up after the break. Welcome back. 1 week after the father of the late Jordan River Anderson spoke out, Jordan's principal continues to be in the news for the services not being funded or for the questionable services it is funding. Our Truth in Politics panel is here now to discuss. Jennifer Leywitz is CEO of Pasqua Harbor Strategies, and Egon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer and Egon, thanks for being with us as always. Egon, we'll start with you, and the Fed saying more than $8 billion in funding has been announced for Jordan's principal since 2016. Yet there's still a huge backlog of unprocessed claims. Money has been spent on things like office supplies, computers, sports equipment, headshots for fashion modeling. Is all of this in keeping with the intent of Jordan's principal?
Before we came on, or just recently when I was writing my own pieces on this controversy involving Jordan's principal, I went back and I looked at the federal government website on the definition on what is the criteria for funding under Jordan's principal. And according to the federal government website, it says that to ensure that all First Nations children can access the products, services, and supports they need when they need them, despite where they live and what circumstances they live in. Funding can help with a wide range of health, social, and educational needs, and it kind of lists off a few different things that might be some unique needs. The spirit of Jordan's principle was built predominantly on emergent cases. And if we think back to Jordan Anderson, it was about the fact that he needed urgent, long-term care, health care in order simply to survive. What that has now become is a catch-all for what has been an emergent situation that First Nations children find themselves in after a long period of chronic neglect, of mistreatment, underfunding of communities, which then there's, if you're to say to yourself, what are the reasons that children go into the child welfare system or that suffer or die? There are thousands of reasons. And so Jordan's principle has become this catch-all. It is a very complicated situation, and $8 billion is just the tip of the iceberg to try to begin to just bring First Nations children to the same standard of living that every single Canadian enjoys and has privileges and access to.
Jennifer, Jordan River Anderson's father, Ernest, recently spoke out and criticized First Nations leaders over the way Jordan's principle is being used or abused. What do you make of what he had to say?
I think that I'm actually on his side on this, and it's been a really weird few weeks talking about the conversation around Jordan's principle and the backlog, because initially I had entered this space being a little bit upset with government, but then once I heard Jordan River Anderson's dad speak out about it, it kind of opened my eyes that perhaps the wide scope of what is eligible under Jordan's principle has created a lot of uncertainty and perhaps mismanagement. But is it mismanagement if nations and the people managing Jordan's principle didn't know any better? But it's also, what I've noticed is taking a little bit of the accountability off of the province as well. Like province of Saskatchewan, we're seeing today that the Saskatoon school division they're cutting a bunch of EAs because they were leaning quite heavily on Jordan's principle funding. So it's like, well, if the provinces aren't funding education like they should be, then they're leaning on other areas, and it's creating this backlog and this mess. Applications are up 900%. How is the federal government even supposed to address that? And now they're sifting through tons and tons of different applications that, may be urgent, some might not be urgent, and unfortunately the only people who fall through the cracks are the ones who need it the most, and that's really, really concerning.
Right. Egon, that same day that Jordan's father spoke, a chief here in Manitoba criticized the federal government and also said that chiefs and councils were being made out to be bandits on social media. Is the blame on leadership misplaced?
Yeah, I'll just slightly, not perhaps disagree, but just slightly point out that would I don't know if it's that Chiefs don't know any better. It's that Chiefs have an overwhelming series of demands in order to be able to service those communities. Certainly those young people in those communities are dealing with suicide epidemics, are dealing with even just not having a youth center, or access to basic services like computers, internet, being able to have the same kind of sport programs, the same kind of mental health. I mean, imagine just if the lack of nursing stations are on First Nations, imagine the lack of mental health workers. And Jennifer's absolutely right. This is something that the provinces have woefully been absent on, and have simply just put up their hands and say, well, those First Nations are federal responsibilities, so oh well, and then throw up their hands and say, cry out foul, when those same young people end up in provincial healthcare systems in cities. And that's when we get into the situation of Jordan Anderson, where the provincial governments say, well, the federal government should be paying for this and so on. This is not an issue of chief mismanagement. It is not an issue of chiefs exploiting or First Nations organizations exploiting funds. This is an issue of overwhelming demands, a lack of commitment for just basic things like education. Like going back to Jennifer's example in Saskatchewan, if there's a need for 80 EAs to help First Nations kids who are in the provincial system to just become the same level as everyone else, and if Saskatchewan goes, oh, well, I guess we're not going to fund those. They have identified the problem. Well, deal with it. That's what your whole job is as an education system. And just putting up your hands and going, oh, well, those kids, I guess they're just not going to get the services now, is exactly the kind of mentality that led to the death of Jordan Anderson.
Jennifer, in testimony last spring, the Associate Deputy Minister of Indigenous Services Canada listed off some of the things that urgent requests were being made under Jordan's principle, things that we touched on there: modeling headshots, a zipline kit, glow sticks, expenses for pets. Are these the types of things you think that the program should be used for?
Well, and I think that's part of the problem, right, is those are not urgent requests. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to sit here and say that acquiring glow sticks and modeling headshots are urgent, because they're not. You know, I'm an Indigenous person with a disability, and, you know, my disability when diagnosed was quite significant. It's a neuro disease. And if you notice that little orange cup behind me, if you can't see the logo, it's from an Indigenous advocacy group called BC ANDS, where that's what they do, is they raise the awareness around Indigenous disability, because our barriers are so much more significant than non-Indigenous people, and even accessing help when things like Jordan's principle are tied up, and even other areas of healthcare where, you know, if you need counseling services or assessments or anything like that, and they're saying, well, that has to go through NIHB, that right there is a mess. And that could be why things are falling onto Jordan's principle, because anyone that's ever tried to use non-insured health benefits through their treaty status, trying to get glasses, you have to hope that those healthcare providers even offer direct billing, because a lot of people don't have that type of money just to put it up front. When I went through my assessments for my ADHD, it was thousands of dollars that I had to save to get assessed later in life, because through the ministry that gave my family no support when I got out of foster care, there was just never any money or extra funding available for my family to get me the help that I needed. And so now, even as adults, we're seeing what that's looking like in crime and addiction and mental health for people that never did get the services when they were younger, what that looks like now when they're adults. What's going to happen now to all these youth that are falling through the cracks in 10, 15 years from now? I do think we do have a collective responsibility as a people. I know it's in my teachings. We don't take more than we give. Try to be reasonable, you know, try to be fair. And I hope this serves as more of a wake-up call. Rather than pointing fingers, we come back to the table and say, okay, I agree. Let's try to measure on our nations what we actually deem as urgent and what might just be a want that could help you get to that top success level. But we need to be measuring it carefully so that kids with disabilities and health and urgent needs do not fall through the cracks.
Jennifer Negon, we're going to leave it there. Of course, lots to talk about here with Jordan's Principle, and we're going to continue the conversation over on the Truth and Politics podcast. Thanks to you both, as always.
Yeah, we got you.
A one-of-a-kind musical tour is set to hit the road. Details on that and more after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Even in the winter, Montmorency Falls is a hidden gem located just 15 minutes from Quebec City. Thanks to Chantal Lee for sharing this beautiful picture. You can send your pictures to share@aptn.ca and you could be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, +4 in Halifax, -6 in Fredericton. 13 below with snow in Kuujjuaq, flurries and -9 in Nain, -2 in Montreal, flurries and 9 below in Val-d'Or. -5 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, cloudy and 4 below in North Bay. -9 in Thunder Bay, snow and -12 in Sioux Lookout. -16 in God's Lake, 15 below in Norway House. -14 for Winnipeg, -15 in Dauphin. -19 in Regina, 20 below in Saskatoon. -19 in Meadow Lake and La Ronge. In northern Alberta, sunny and -18 for High Level and Fort Chipewyan. -16 in Edmonton, 14 below in Lethbridge. +1 in Vancouver, 2 above and cloudy in Victoria. -14 in Prince George, 13 below for Smithers. -17 in Old Crow, snow and -16 in Whitehorse. -24 in Yellowknife, 17 below with snow in Norman Wells. -31 in Sax Harbor, snow and 27 below in Paulatuck. -25 with snow in Chesterfield, 33 below and snow in Cambridge Bay. -20 in Resolute, 32 below in Joe Haven. A one-of-a-kind Indigenous school music tour kicks off this Monday in Manitoba. The tour will bring musician and Peguis First Nation member Nelson Little to schools across 18 Indigenous communities in Manitoba. Reporter Sierra Bettens caught up with Little and program coordinator Rhonda Head before they hit the road.
For a few years now, I've been trying to find purpose in why I write and what my message is as a writer, and what I believe in as an artist. So I think speaking and going out to these communities is something I have a passion for.
In less than a week, Indigenous country music artist Nelson Little will embark on a 3-month tour like no other.
This one is one of the biggest tours that we've taken on, and we're going to 18 Indigenous communities right throughout Manitoba. So it's really exciting that Nelson's going to be part of this one of the biggest tours that we're starting.
Internationally renowned Cree vocalist Rhonda Head has organized 5 tours through the Indigenous touring program. Funded by Canadian Heritage, the Manitoba Arts Council, and the Manitoba Arts Network, the program brings live music to students in Indigenous communities across Manitoba.
It's important that we do an Indigenous tour because they need to see a brown face who's succeeding in the music industry, where we empower them and we inspire them.
The journey begins on Monday in St. Teresa Point, a flying community about 465 kilometers north of Winnipeg. After stops in Garden Hill and Wasagamak, the tour will visit communities in southwestern, southern, and northern Manitoba.
They're in remote places and they can't leave the community, so it's really exciting that we're going into the community and inspiring youth one community at a time.
Little grew up in northern Manitoba and is a member of the Peguis First Nation. These days, the 3-time Country Music Award winner lives in Portage la Prairie, where he balances being a dad, a musician, and a carpenter.
I'm a carpenter as well. Since 18 years old, I actually worked on the Wasagamak school. So it's going to be neat to speak to those students and let them know that those hallways, when they were steel studs, I was there putting them together and stuff.
While he's excited to hit the stage, the tour is more than a performance. In between songs, Little will share how he got from where the students are to where he is today.
So I was in a gun accident at 13, and I was in a car accident at 17, all in my high school years. So I feel I have the message for them that even with some trials in your life, you can still dream big and you can still go get what you want, even if it's something fun like playing guitar and singing songs.
The last leg of the tour wraps up on May 9th in Waskwesipik First Nation, north of Dauphin, Manitoba. And while the stops are short, Head says the impact is lasting.
To see the kids smiling and you could see that sparkle in their eye and you could see their minds rolling, and then you could see that the musicians are inspiring the youth.
Now that I finally understand my life with all the hardships as a youth, how I overcame it, and I think that's where this collaboration is going to work really well, is to just share how I did it, because that's what they need to hear, is how you overcome challenges and reach for the goal.
Anytime, anywhere, anyone, just make it happen.
Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Great initiative there. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a look at tonight's Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the news, the federal government and First Nations child advocacy groups continue to battle it out over the application of Jordan's Principle requests. Cindy Blackstock of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society is here to talk about the latest. Meanwhile, funding for the Inuit Child First Initiative is set to expire in a matter of weeks, but says Nunavut NDP MP Laurie Idlout raising alarm bells. As well, Algonquin Senator Patrick Brazo continues his fight to place labels on alcohol products that warn of cancer risks. I'll have all that in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Fraser. Nation to Nation is airing right here in less than 2 minutes' time. We're all out of time for your news for this Thursday. You can find much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. And Creason will be back here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow with your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Have a good night.